An honest old friend, a merry old song, flask of old Pointe, bit the night long. Flask of old Pointe, bit the night long. Laugh at the anger, those who repine. Laugh at the anger, those who repine. They must drink porter, while I can drink wine. They must drink porter, while I can drink wine.
Trembley Pointe formed in the late 1600s as a large number of clinker plots settled by third-level associates from the 1699 redistribution and were located there. The third wave of settlers into Elizabethtown charter were portioned only a single lot, and all of these homesteaders lived on the plot they worked, and just like that, a village was born. There were first and second level associates, like the Marshes, and of course the Trembleys, who also lived in the new neighborhood, as the village built up around their rural homesteads. Those farms were there for 35 and 25 years prior, respectively. Members of the large Marsh family continued to move upriver and into the interior of Essex and Middlesex counties. Peter Marsh would found the village of Rahway, about 2.5 miles southwest of Trembley Pointe, along the river. We will discuss Upper Rahway later. Trembley's development, even in colonial days, was aided by the major roads of Lower Road and Trembley Pointe Road, which were in fact pre-colonial Indian trails. Trembley Pointe Road leading to the waterfront, and Lower Road cupping the bend of good hunting lands leading to the river, then continuing along the river to an area of the county's largest permanent Lenni-Lenape village. The Lenni-Lenape seasonally moved to and fro minor villages dependent on the planting and hunting, while the permanent village of the further inland was where the Raritan people wintered. The Trembley village also had the area's first sawmill built in 1683 and a grain mill built in 1684 by John Marsh. John's grain mill was sold in later years to Stephen Van Cortlandt, and in 1733 changing over to William Donaldson, until Samuel Marsh bought it back in 1739 along with Joseph Meyer. There was also a dock and a tavern by just after the Revolutionary era. Patriots Jacob and Thomas Marsh moored a large vessel there. That tavern was called Dendler's Grove, but we are not sure if that was there before the Revolution or after the colonial period. The village of Wheat Sheaf, also known as the hamlet of Wheat Sheaf, was named for its tavern, one of 3 listed by cartographers in Elizabethtown at the time of the Revolution. It was denoted as the village that separates Elizabethtown and the village of Rahway. However, the history of this small hamlet goes back to the 1740s. It was a coach stop along the road to Rahway, as well as a tavern being a mail depot for the village and rural area, a meeting house for the official businesses, and a central socializing locale for most of the Linden and Roselle area, which is in addition to Elizabeth proper, as many families went downtown as well. Wheat Sheaf also had its own school by 1750. It stood across from the Wheat Sheaf Tavern, and it was utilized well past the colonial period into the 1820s. The first teacher was named John Cotton. An interesting or humorous anecdote cited by Lauren Panchik Yeats in her book Linden, New Jersey, was that his punishment for misbehaving was to have the defiant youth cut wood for the wood-burning stove. As the most established through the colonial times and early Republic period, the village of Wheat Sheaf would serve as the first official meeting hall for the township of Linden a little more than a century after its beginnings. The Wheat Sheaf Tavern, built in 1745 on what would become the border of the borough of Roselle and the city of Linden in the early 20th century, this was the main rural center and the namesake of the area in Elizabethtown named the Wheat Sheaf neighborhood. This was a major farm area with several clinker lots of homesteaders and large tracts farmed by families like the Woods, Hatfields, Marshes, Winans, and parts of the Ogdens estate. Later in the 17th century, coming from Long Island, the Clarks, whose progeny Abraham Clark, signer of Declaration of Independence, built up a large farm down the road a quarter mile or so with his acreage adjacent to the tavern on both sides of King George's Road. That road is now St. George's Highway, Route 27, a road General Washington took on his way to his inauguration in New York City in 1789, passing right past this tavern, a tavern named for the neighborhood he had sent letters to during the War of Independence in recognition of the sacrifices and the steadfast resolve of the men in this then Elizabethtown neighborhood, patriots whom endured the struggle on what was the front line for the majority of the war. Greater Elizabethtown. The village of Greater Elizabethtown was actually part of the original sprawl of Elizabeth Center, and not so much a village in colonial times as it was an area of industry and homesteads, which in ways is not much different from today. This area is the 8th ward of the city of Linden in modern times. Most of the area was owned by the Hatfields, while members of the Clark, Ogden, and Winans family also had farms in Greater Elizabeth. This area was home to an apple orchard and cider mill owned by Cornelius Hatfield Jr. by the time of the Revolution. He was Linden's most infamous loyalist, and his cider mill and orchard and farmlands were confiscated by Patriot forces during the Revolution. Although he had a farmhouse here in Linden, most likely his original abode, Cornelius was quite prosperous and built a mansion along the river in Elizabeth. Upper Rahway. It has been noted that the Colonial Rahway village was founded by Peter Marsh. The neighborhood was on either side of the river, known as Upper Rahway to the north end of the river and the south end above Bridge Street, and Lower Rahway on the south side of the Rahway, south of Bridge Street, including parts of today's Woodbridge Township. Upper Rahway spread into today's Linden and land from St. George's Ave west to Elizabeth Ave to the east to Style Street to the north. Those homes and farmlands were considered part of Upper Rahway. However, the village itself only went a quarter mile or so into today's Linden. Most of Linden was incorporated into the township of Rahway in 1804, and the impact of the neighborhood is relevant to the colonial history of Linden.